There I am. Good morning, my friends. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to another gathering of our small group, PB Reads the Bible. What is that, you might ask? I'm PB. I'm Pastor Brian, pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. And PB Reads the Bible is our small group where we gather across distance and across time to read from the Bible together. I read out loud. Excuse me. You follow along in your own Bibles or just listen. Some folks just listen. Both are perfectly acceptable. Nothing wrong with that. And I add to it with some commentary, some to help provide context and understanding, so that we could have a better understanding of what's actually taking place in it. It's important to know those kind of things, right? So that's what we do. That's what it's been a little while since we've been here. We've done this a bunch of times before, probably 15 or 17 books of the Bible, something like that. I have the list there, but I don't feel like reaching over and counting right now. And we're going to start a new session. It's been a little bit, been almost 2 months, been a month and a half anyway, 5 to 6, 7 weeks since we last gathered. Just needed to take a little break from that. And yeah, lots of stuff going on in my life, in the life of the church, and in your lives. So we took a little extended break, but we're back on it, and we're going to take a look at the book of we're going to look at the book of First Thessalonians, and then we're going to go right into the Second Thessalonians. These are two letters from Paul. That's a little sneak peek, though, of things, because we're going to get into that. First, if this is your well, welcome to one and all. Welcome to one and all. I know some of you have been joining in and part of this small group, like pretty much from day one of when we started it, which was a long time ago. While others, maybe this is your first time joining us, you stumbled upon us this morning, or you've recently been connecting with our church, our worship experiences on Sunday, and you got to notice this morning that we were doing a live video because you subscribed recently. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. We also welcome you, and we hope you hang around here uh, to go through it. Again, if you've been doing this for a while, you know what I'm going to say next, and that's going to be this is your romper room roll call. Facebook gives me a number of people that are joining with us, and YouTube gives a number for who's joining, but I'd like to know who we are. That way I can kind of picture you as I'm speaking, and also keep you in my prayers, because prayers are an important part of this too. So go ahead and let me know. And I see it popping up here on the side. So I'm going to be looking off to my left here to check to see who's there today. Good morning, Marcia. Good to have you joining us this morning. Good morning, John and Cindy. Oh, yeah. Hey, joining us from York. That's awesome. We love that. Um, and you know what? Let me make that a care. We're so glad that you're able to join us from York. Totally understand if you need to jump off quickly. Get that therapy going there, John. And we hope to see you soon. You can also send me a text to check in, as someone just did. Ron is also marked his attendance. He is here, and he says, greetings to all. And his joy to share, which I did mention in worship this past Sunday, is a new grandchild for him, as his son and daughter-in-law Jason in Montana had their fourth child, baby boy named Marshall Tate, 21 inches long, 8 pounds 8 ounces. Goodness gracious. And the family is doing well, which is all awesome stuff. And thank you for sharing that, Ron. We share in your joys. We share in your joys. Remember, that's an important thing. It is an important thing. It's scriptural. Rejoice when others rejoice, and mourn when others mourn. So we share our laughter and our joys and our tears when we are together. And hey, folks, even if you're not joining our session live, if you're joining our small group some other time of the day, because for me it's Tuesday, March 5th, and it's 9:05. a.m. For you, it might be sometime this afternoon. It might be 3 o'clock in the morning 2 weeks from now. Ooh. Uh, you can still mark your attendance. Say you joined in because I go back in and I look. The other thing that the comments section, I encourage you to use the comments section of the stream for is to tell us, not just me, but each other, those things that are on your hearts and your minds. What is it that's lifting you up or weighing you down? So we can keep each other surrounded and lifted in prayer. The other thing you do use it for is to share comments or questions, because I do go back in and I look a couple times today and over the next several days at least, if not farther, to see what it is that you're saying and if there's other questions or comments that I might have missed. I try to address them right away as we're going through here, but sometimes I don't see them. Sometimes Facebook doesn't show me them right away. So I make sure I go back in and I look at those things. I will share. So we got the joy, we've got the concern with John, his rehab and get that going, keep it going. I would share the concern for the congregation, for the church, our church family here at CUMC of the death of Jake Midhour, unexpected and very very quick. So I would ask for prayers for his family, for Colleen, his spouse, and for his sisters Sue and Louise, and family and other family, and of course friends, and of course his church family. Jake had a strong connection with a lot of people here, however you might phrase that. A lot of people had a connection with Jake, back and forth, both. Ah, so sorry about that. I need a drink of tea. All right, my friends, let's have a prayer and then we'll get into our readings for today. Good morning, God. Thank you for this day. And to my personal vision and mind, it's not a very pretty one because it's gloomy and cloudy and rainy, but it's still a gift. So help me to receive it as the gift and help all of us to receive it as the gift that it is. And as the rain waters the earth, we pray for your spirit to wash down upon us and cleanse us and empower us for growth. And may your spirit be guiding us this morning as we have this gathering, this small group, and this discussion of the Bible. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Okay, my friends. So we're going to be looking at the first letter to the Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians, whatever. The British say that. They don't say first or second. They say one. They say one Thessalonians. Interesting stuff. We're going to talk about this for a little bit. And that's probably all we're going to do today is talk about some of the context, the background, and try to place this in a place, in a geographical location, as well as time, and try to give a little bit of background, what we know, what we don't know, and kind of what people think, and that's mostly what it is what people think. There's not a whole lot that we definitely know, but we're gonna talk about all that, and that's probably all we're gonna get to today because that's gonna take a little bit of time, but it's important stuff. So don't expect us to get into actually reading from First Thessalonians until Thursday, okay? Because I'm probably going to talk too long about this stuff. I geek out, I think, sometimes over context, but it's so important. Anyway, whenever you're reading a book of the Bible, it's important to know what kind of book it is and what type of literature it is. We think of the Bible as one book, and in some ways it is because this is one book, but it's made up of 66 different books. So it's not a singular book. It's one volume, perhaps, that contains within it 66 different books. And those books do fall into different categories. Are they history? Are they gospels? Are they apocalyptic literature, poetry, wisdom, uh, letters, letters? Is it poetry or narrative? And sometimes they overlap because there are books that have both of those qualities. So what we're going to be looking at is First Thessalonians, which does fall into the category of letter or epistle. Or epistle. Letter is a simpler word, right? That's the word that we would use far more often in our lives, a letter rather than an epistle or whatever. We tend to reserve that word for special things, perhaps, such as this. But it's a letter. It's a letter. And in particular, it's a hortatory letter, which means it's an exhortation. It, that's the purpose of the letter, is for exhortation. Now, exhortation can mean multiple things. Sometimes we might think of that word as like a very strong, almost nasty word, like being argumentative and telling people they're doing things wrong and you're exhorting them. But and sometimes that's the case, including with the letters in the Bible. Other times, an exhortation is merely to encourage. When you're encouraging someone to keep doing what they're doing, that's an exhortation. You're exhorting them to continue and to do good. So this is a hortatory letter, and it's mostly of that, like of those two that I just described, the latter kind. It's encouraging. It's meant to encourage the readers, the folks for whom it was written, and that's important. Um, I'm guilty of it too, I'm sure. When I say, let's see what Paul has to say to us today. Well, Paul wasn't writing to us, and that's important. And there's their spoiler. I should have given a spoiler alert. This we consider this, it's almost universally accepted that this was written by Saint Paul. Okay, that this was written by Saint Paul. Not all of the letters in the New Testament were written by Saint Paul, including some of the ones that were attributed to him and might have his name in them, probably weren't written by him because they deal with stuff that didn't arise as an issue until after his death. That's how we kind of know that it wasn't, certain ones weren't written by St. Paul. They were probably written by people, they were definitely written by people in his name. Like they were, you might say, successors, or they claimed to be successors of St. Paul's teachings. And so they used his name to try to give credence and weight to their words. That's not the case with Thessalonians, with either First or Second Thessalonians. We're confident in accepting that these were written by Paul, but Paul didn't write them to us. Okay, Paul did not write them to us. We might be able to gather knowledge. I shouldn't say we might be. We can gather some understanding, and we can connect our lives and the lives of our churches today to the words of Paul. But we should remember that he did not write them to us. If he were writing to us today, he would not be writing the same thing. The purpose for this letter is definitely tied to a particular time, a particular age, and a particular group of people. Um, that's important to remember, not just with this, but with any of the books of the Bible, but in particular the letters of Paul. Uh, Adam Hamilton uses the story, the metaphor. He said he talks about a friend of his who has two children. Uh, and he said, so think about this: if you have two children and they're vastly different from each other. He said his friend has a son and a daughter, and the son works as hard as he has to, but he likes to do a lot of fun stuff, and he's not really connected to his job, we might say. He's not driven in that way. He likes to spend he likes his free time, and he likes to do all kind of fun stuff. whereas his friend's daughter is very career driven and oriented and works, whatever, like 12, 14 hour, 16-hour days, 5, 6 days a week, sometimes seven, putting in 80 hours, whatever her job is, because she's driven to succeed in her career. Now, so put yourself in the place of that father, that parent. Would you have the same conversation with those two children? Right? If you were to write them a little note or a letter, or even if you were just to talk to them, you probably wouldn't say the same things to both of them. Adam uses the story. He says, so his friend wrote, two different notes to letters. He told his son, "Hey, I love you, and I love your zest for life, your love of life, and your love of these things, and your skiing and all that stuff. Great, great. I would encourage you to also spend a little bit more of that energy, on a career. Maybe what you're doing right now isn't what you want to be doing the rest of your life. I understand that, but you need to find your way, and encouraging him, exhorting him to dedicate some more time to his career. But the father wrote a note to the daughter as well. I love you, and I love how much you're driven in your career, and how dedicated you are, and how much you want to succeed. However, I encourage you to take some time for yourself. Enjoy life while you're living. Stop and smell the roses. Have you considered doing these kind of things? That makes sense, doesn't it? If you're talking to two different people, you're writing letters to two different children, you're gonna phrase them differently, and because you're gonna address them in different ways. So when we read a letter from Paul to the church at Thessalonica, we need to remember that it was written to the church at Thessalonica, not the church in Galatia, not the church in Ephesus. We have those letters, maybe written by Paul, maybe not. I don't, but they have different content. And the same would be true if Paul were writing to any 21st century church, including the church in Thessalonica. So, time placement is important in understanding what Paul is saying and why Paul is saying it. We're at 9:17. So, most likely, like I said, understood, written by Paul. And yes, written to the church in Thessalonica. Where is Thessalonica? Because that's important. So I'm going to share my screen and show a picture here for you. Uh, here's a map of Macedonia. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, that's not what I'm doing. All right. Anyway, oh, there it is. Okay, that's it. This is Macedonia. This is Macedonia, which is, oh, and Achaia. This is, it was Greek, right? It was part of Greece. It was part of the Grecian Empire. However, by the time of Paul, it was part of the Roman Empire. Okay, but we've got all kinds of things here, and you'll recognize some of the names of some of these places, right? Here's Sparta, Corinth, Athens, Delphi, Nicopolis. That's not quite as familiar. Mount Olympus, and yes, but right up here on the top, here's the Thracian Sea, which is north of the Aegean Sea, and we've got this bay that goes in here. And what's that town right there? Yes, you can read it as well as I can. Thessalonica. And right over here is Philippi. Oops, maybe I went too big on that. Okay, that worked. That was better, Brian. Um, Thessalonica, and over here is Philippi. Philippi. why is this important? And what's this dotted line, this dashed line going across here? Well, it says via Ignatia, uh, which is Latin. Via means way, and Ignatia would be is it's the Ignatian way, the Ignatian way. It was a major highway. It was a major highway all across Macedonia, from the Adriatic Sea, Dyrrhachium, over past Neapolis and continuing on over into. It was a major trade route, and it was a major trade route, major transportation, major way of getting from one place to the other. Okay. And look where Thessalonica is, right on this major road and on this bay leading to the Thracian Sea. Thessalonica was an important town. Okay, it was the estimates by historians and archaeologists put it in the neighborhood of the population in the neighborhood of about 200,000 people. So we're not talking Waynesboro. We're not talking some little blip or tiny burg. It's a fairly large metropolis, especially for the day, especially for the time. And what is the time? The time is approximately 50 AD CE, Common Era, whichever way you want to phrase it. Approximately 50. Uh, Looking at the book of the Acts, as well as some of the other letters, we can kind of follow, you follow Paul's route, where he was, and where he went to. He Paul went from town to town and spent only so much time there as he could before he went on to somewhere else. So one of the major places where Paul went was to Philippi. They had problems, and but at some point he ended up in Thessalonica. He may also and most likely went from Philippi to Thessalonica, but also sent people on to other places. And he ends up, let's see, where are we at? Um, Sorry, I think he's in Athens. Hmm? Yes, yes. Okay. So after he left Thessalonica, which we don't know how long he was there, um, he was obviously there long enough to start up his trade, which was tent making. Most likely, and this is interesting, I always thought of that as being working with fabrics. Actually, it's probably more like leather. He was probably a leather worker. That's it. That's interesting. And he did that to help subsidize what he did and stuff. But he's probably there long enough to set up a decent shop and stuff like that. But he moved on, and he did go to Athens, which wasn't all that great. He was not successful there in Athens. But from Athens, he went to Corinth. From Athens, he went to Corinth. And he had sent some of the people that were with him, including Timothy, to other places. And at some point, he sent Timothy back to Thessalonica to to see how things were going. And Timothy reports back to him in Corinth, comes to him in Corinth and tells him how things are going in Thessalonica. And things are going so well that Paul, it seems, it appears that Paul immediately sat down and wrote this first letter, the first Thessalonians, to the church in Corinth. So uh, it dates it to 50 or maybe 51 when Paul wrote this letter, either 50 or 51. The evidence suggests that it did take place, that he did write it um, before before a certain proconsul showed up in Corinth, the new politician who was running Corinth, Gallio, and some historical monuments date that to 53 AD, something like that, 52, 53, maybe even 51. So it's most likely that he wrote this in 50 or early 51, spring of 51. So he wrote this letter to them. Okay. It's important to know why, like why Paul wrote it. What is the purpose? What are the theological uh, texts, and what's the purpose for doing this? Excuse me a sec. I'm sorry, back up a sec. Based on where Corinth, or yeah, Thessalonica, which was named after Alexander's half sister, Alexander the Great. It was named after his half sister, Thessalonica. Uh, or Thessaloniki might be. And you might catch that last part of that Nike, who she herself was named, at least in part, after the Greek goddess Nike. When I forget who she was a lesser goddess, and I don't remember what she was. But yes, that's where Nike sneakers come from. So Thessalonica is an important town um, economically because it's a very big trade port. It's right there on the bay, right on that Agnatian Way. It's also a fairly strong political community, and it's an independent city. It's an independent city. It's Although it has connections to Rome, it still is allowed to govern itself. So it's a political city as well as an economically important city. So when we're reading this letter from Paul, Paul uses some language that is actually quite political. And if we don't have that in mind, we're going to misunderstand what he's saying. We're going to misunderstand the strength of his comment, and we're just not going to get it. We're going to think he's saying one thing when he's actually saying something else because the words are very politically charged. So we have to keep that in our mind as we go along. Um, in this book, in this book of First Thessalonians, and also in the letter of the second Thessalonians, so in both of these letters, we're going to find out a lot about Paul's theology. Oh, I should have stated also, based on that date of 50-51 AD, it is strongly agreed. It is agreed by many, but if not most scholars, that this is probably Paul's earliest letter, his earliest writing. Certainly the earliest one that we have. If he had anything earlier than this, it's most likely gone. But based on the ones in the Bible, this is probably the first of his writings. That's the way it looks. That's the way it looks. That's the way it seems. So we're going to see in this Paul's understanding of the gospel. We're going to understand his theology of the gospel. We're also this letter is very strongly apocalyptic. Okay. Paul's gospel was an apocalyptic gospel, meaning which has connections to Jewish theology and of the time as well, from that time and from earlier, and that's the basis for it. Apocalyptic, so the understanding of the apocalyptic literature, and Paul's understanding of that in particular, is that there are two ages. There is the like you would say from them, like the current age, the old age, and the new age. The old age and the new age. And the old age is the age of the world. and the age of sin, the age of evil. And the new age is the age of God's reign, is the age of God's reign. And he and they and still us are living in the in between. And I know I preached on this just a few months ago, but living in the in between, the already and the not yet. For Paul, the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus ends the first age and is the beginning of the new age. However, in the in between, because there, so we're in the already and the not yet. The new age has begun, but the evidence of the old age and the impact of the old age still exists. And so we still have evil, we still have sin, we still have pain and suffering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The ultimate fulfillment of the new age will not happen, Paul says, until the parousia, Parousia. Mark that down because it'll be on the final exam. Uh, Spoiler, there is no final exam, which means coming. Coming literally means coming. So the parousia is the second coming of Christ. When Christ comes back, will be the ultimate fulfillment of the promise and the complete end of the old age. The old age is actually dead. It's done, Paul says, but we still have the evidence from it. It still has an impact, but all of that will be gone, will be taken away when the new begins. That's Paul's gospel. And although we don't know for sure, based on what we read here. So what's the purpose for Paul writing this letter to the Thessalonians? In any letter, any conversation that you have with someone, if someone else is only hearing the other half of the conversation, or in this case, reading the other half of the conversation, all they can do is assume and listen for clues as to what your conversation is really about. And that's all we can do, because we're only seeing Paul's response. We're not hearing or reading exactly what Timothy told Paul. We're not reading anything from the church in Thessalonica. We don't know for sure. We're only getting half of the conversation. So we kind of have to listen for those clues and guess. Our best guess, our best understanding is that this church is sticking with Paul's gospel. They've accepted Paul's gospel, the gospel of which is the gospel of Jesus Christ. Turn and be saved from the wrath to come. Paul was pretty strong with that too, at least from time to time. And they're struggling with this in between. They're struggling with this in between. It's important to remember that all of the first church, the early church, even Jesus's disciples, and I'm sure Paul, thought Jesus was coming back tomorrow, or maybe next week, a month from now at the latest. And here it's been plus or minus 20 years, depending on how you count things, and he hasn't come back yet. So there's concern about that. And it's not that they're losing belief, okay? It's not that they're losing faith. They're willing to trust and to wait. Their biggest seems to be that one of their biggest concerns is what happens to the dead? Whatever, my wife, my husband, my child, my father, my grandparent, my next door neighbor died yesterday. What's going to happen to them when the parousia happens? Have Have they missed it? And have they missed their chance? And so that seems to be one of, if not the major concern for this letter and for the church in Thessalonica. So my friends, wow, 9:35. I told you I was going to talk a lot. Um, we will be back though on Tuesday. And like I said, we probably weren't going to get to the scripture today, and we didn't. But we will, I promise though, we will actually start reading from First Thessalonians on Thursday. On Thursday, okay? So please come back. Please come back. That'll be Thursday, March 7th. And if you can't come back on that day, you can always pick up the video recording afterwards, both on YouTube and Facebook, and it will be identified as to what it is and all that. So, my friends, thank you for joining with me today, for being here with me today, or whenever it is you're with me. Um, I pray that this has been beneficial to you, that it wasn't a complete waste of your time, that you learned something or relearned something, that God spoke to you in some way through our conversation this morning as you go about your day, not just this day, but every day. Keep your eyes and ears, both physical and spiritual, open to everything our living, loving, active God is doing in your life and in the lives of those around you. When you see it, when you hear it, say, "Thank you, Papa," and then tell somebody about it. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed.